Okay, so you began in 1970 something, what you call your 40-year career as a civil servant. I know nothing about this part of your life at all. Could you please fill me in?
Well, actually, Andy, you brightened up the last decade or so of the 40 years. So uh, when I came back from Israel, which is where we left off, thinking I was going back, I started a temporary job on December 23rd, 1974, which I retired from on April 1st, 2011. So temporary could last a pretty damn long time.
A long time, Jesus.
A long damn time. So so when I went to work, my father was something of a big shot in the hospital system, the city hospital system in New York, which is the second largest in the world after Paris. And so when I came back from Israel, because he was so high up, he had connections. He didn't want me sitting around the house. So he called up a friend who called me in for an interview, which I thought was a formality. So I showed up for this interview in December 1974 in a sweatshirt and jeans because I thought, yeah, that's a gimme. My father had already, all the strings were pulled. And so I get interviewed by the controller of Kings County Hospital, which at the time had something like 1,200 beds. So it's a huge, huge, huge hospital. And so the controller of the hospital says to me, so Mitch, tell me why you would be a good hospital care investigator, which is the title. And I said, so I was very well prepared. I said, well, tell me what the job is, and then I'll tell you why I'll be good at it. Well, it didn't make any difference. So even with my sweatshirt, I really like this sweatshirt and jeans. I got the job. And then I embarked on, because my career actually has several different steps in it. So this first one was dedicated to doing as little as was humanly possible in any given day. And I have to say that I was probably never so successful in my life as I was at that part of my job.
You're giving civil servants
so
a bad name.
Well, I was the epitome of the civil servant, but it wasn't just me, because this was 1974. So all my coworkers were the same thing as me. We were like a whole bunch of white kids come out of college with liberal arts degrees. Mine was in film history, who were good at absolutely nothing. So we fallen into this job through connections in one way or another. And so all of us did nothing. It's just amazing that the hospitals were still standing by the time we got done with them. But I really was the master. There is, later on in my career, when I became a manager, I would tell my staff, don't ever try any trick, because any trick that you pull, I'm the one who invented it. So I'm going to know just what you're doing when you try and fuck off. So at any rate, but I mean, I was so gifted at this and so focused on it. So for example, I worked in patient accounts, which is the kind of job that people like in Australia and all around the world would just find absolutely abhorrent. I was the guy when somebody came into the hospital, asked what kind of insurance did you have?
Oh my God.
When I was thinking about this the other day, we weren't really that odious, because our job was, if you don't have insurance, to get you insurance. Have you apply for Medicaid or whatever, whatever they say, the bill would be paid. Nevertheless, there were ways to do it, which I quickly learned, where you never had to see a patient. I could just invent everything from whole cloth, fake everything that I did, and still get the hospital paid. So my bosses left me alone. But I was so adamant about doing nothing and so good at it. So I would come in at 9 o'clock, have coffee, have whatever at my desk. And then by 9:30, I had my book open under my desk and I would read all day. It was absolute heaven, because I could knock off my fake work in just a few minutes and then just read. And the one good habit that I got out of that was, in one of the offices I worked in, I had a coworker who was just this real uptight, wore a leisure suit every day, different color. And he used to write, a coworker and I found that he used to write inspirational quotes on his desk calendar.
Mm. Mm.
And so that inspired us because I had this coworker who also did nothing all day but read. So we had an assignment. Every day we had to have a quote that we pulled out of whatever we were reading.
Mm.
That was like a great standalone, whatever.
Mm.
And he would write his on my calendar and I would write mine on his.
Purposive reading.
Excuse me?
Purposive reading.
Yeah.
You don't just read, you read for a purpose. You're looking
Exactly.
for a gem of knowledge. Yeah.
So, and in fact, I have right here my current version of it. I never stopped. Right. So when I read, I have in the house a shelf like this of quotes that I've pulled out of books that I'm reading in the various languages that I read. And I've given my wife and son an assignment when I croak that they should put it all together because it's an autobiography with not a single word written by me.
Mm.
Because obviously whatever quotes I pull out of a book are things that appeal to me. Anyway, go back to work. So I do this for several years. And every day, the first thing I did was hate myself, though, because I knew this wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And I would think about going to graduate school, or I think about trying to find a real job. Never happened. I'd settled in. I had my civil service job because it was something that was ingrained in me.
Yeah.
My father had two brothers. So there were three Abidor uncles who had 4 civil service jobs among them. So you really got to work at it to have more civil service jobs than people in one family. And my grandma, my grandparents, Jewish immigrants, what they thought the goal in life was security in work. This is all that mattered. And so they all along, especially my grandma would say, Mitchell, civil service. You get vacation, you get a pension, civil service. You should go civil service. And you know what? I don't think that at any point in my life, I ever got better advice than from my grandma. Okay. So anyway, so I put up with this. I do this for several years. And then one day I just couldn't do it anymore. And I love film, and I decided I was going to go to film school. So I quit, went to film school. I don't want to go into the details of it. It's actually not as interesting as it might sound. But film school didn't really work out very well because my interest was so different from those of the NYU Graduate Film School that my faculty advisor said, you don't belong here, you belong in France.
Right.
And I know a really famous screenwriter in France. He knows everybody. If you'll if you'll go to Paris, I'll set you up with all these people. And so the next day, I sublet my apartment, made reservations, and I was gone within a few weeks. Discuss what happened in France. Maybe when we discuss love, because it's Paris.
Yeah. We'll pick that up later.
We'll pick that up. But what happened was, I come home from France and with a French woman who I'm going to marry, and so I need a job.
Right.
So, the only thing that I knew was working in hospitals, inpatient accounts. Well, again, so I go back, and this time I'm working at Harlem Hospital. And so when I start work again, same job, which I'd sworn I'd left behind. And I remember my first day, it probably was the first time in decades I sat and I cried in a stairwell because I so hated the job. I said, how the fuck am I going to do this again? Yeah. But then what happened was shortly thereafter, and I hated it. The job was still awful. I got a couple of breaks though, and the managers liked me, and I decided, you know what? I hate this, but it's what I'm going to do. I might as well accept it. I made an attempt to escape. It's not happening. I'm stuck. I'm going to be a civil servant till the day I die, or until the day I stop working, whichever comes first. And so I said, if I'm going to do this, I might as well be good at it.
Mhm.
And I really did. I made the conscious choice. I'm going to do well, and I'm going to be getting married, so I need to make money. We're going to have kids, blah, blah, blah. So I work hard, and I get noticed.
Mm.
And after a couple of years working at this awful job in patient accounts, but doing very good at it, I get promoted. So this is what I describe as the great moment, as the beginning of my long, slow climb to the middle. Because this is 1982,
Yeah.
and I retired in 2011, and it looked like I was like, on my way to the top.
Mm.
But the middle was pretty much, where I was going to end up. But it was a long, slow climb to get there. So,
Mm.
so I'm working as a manager. I have various jobs, all in finance, in hospital finance, and I get to be pretty good at it, pretty knowledgeable. But the best job that I had, like in this early part, was I was what was then called a special assistant.
Mm.
Now it's a chief of staff. But I was a special assistant to the chief financial officer of a hospital up in East Harlem, just a few blocks, in fact, from where the Abidors first settled when they came to America. And so my job was, amongst my functions was, my desk was right outside the office of the CFO, the chief financial officer, who was a very difficult, usually unpleasant human being.
Mm.
But we got along okay. And part of my job was to warn all the managers in finance of her mood. So like people would call me up and they would say, Mitch, I need to talk to Ann. There's something that went wrong. Nope, don't do it. Don't do it. Call me later in the day. I'll tell you how the mood is. You come back when she's not going to like tear your head off. Well, people would walk down and I go, turn around and get out of here. Just don't do it. And so it made me very popular. And interestingly, it's now that I'm telling the story, it helped my professional advancement, because those managers never forgot how I helped them out by warning them, by being like, I'm the storm flag, don't do it. So the job was actually not bad. I got to learn a whole lot of stuff, but the hours were crazy. This among the many things that this woman was unpleasant about was how many hours. And one of the things that I always tried to do was 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, and I'm out the door.
Mm.
Because I had other interests. So as much as I hated that first job, I was able to go to see films every night or go to concerts or whatever. I always love jobs where you never think about it the minute you leave.
Yeah.
You don't think about it while you're going to work. You don't. And actually, I also managed to never think about it even while I was there. So I had like really, you can't get much better than that. Yeah, man. So the hours were crazy. I was married. My son was born. My son Pascal was born on the same day as me, in the same hospital as me, except in 1984. So this was late 1984. I get, I'm asked if I wanted, somebody calls who I dealt with, wants to hire me away from this job. I said, it's great. I'll be able to work normal hours. And then when I sat to say farewell to this chief financial officer, she said a story. She told me something that was absolutely fabulous. And I really, one of the highest compliments I ever got. And she said to me, Mitch, and this is our final conversation, you were my personality. She said, I knew just what I was doing with you.
Yeah.
She said, nobody likes me, but they love you. So I send you to something, you go there, you make the people laugh, they give you the information that they would never give me because they hate me. And so you were just perfect for me. We complemented each other perfectly. I know everything. You've got the personality, put us together. And in fact, when I left, she hired to replace me somebody totally inexperienced in hospital finance, but who was a curly-headed young Jew. She just figured, work once, it'll work
Try
twice.
again. Yeah.
Try again. And she worked out well anyway. Okay, so now I begin to really climb the ladder. Well, no, this job that I went to was, again, in a way, ideal. It'd be too complicated to explain to a non-hospital person, hospital finance person, what it was, but there wasn't much to do for 11 and a half months of the year.
Mm.
We had 2 busy weeks, and the rest of the year, we just said, we actually used to do this. My coworker and I, we had so little to do. We got a map of the world that we put up on the wall in the office, and we would say, okay, today we're traveling from New York to Melbourne.
Mm.
It's 2:00 in the afternoon. We took off at 9:00. Where would we be now?
Mm.
This was how we kept ourselves occupied, because there was just nothing else to do.
Mm.
So then I got one of the people for whom I served as a storm warning, hired me to work in medical records at Kings County Hospital. And here, this was a job, again, I had no experience in it. I learned it, and it would actually turn out to be fun. But it also, what it did was, and it's something that I don't know what your experience is with this, Andy, but most people don't. I had to work around doctors or with doctors all day, every day.
Mm.
And one of them once said to me, so of course I told everybody, doctor this, doctor that, whatever.
Mm.
And one of them said, my mother didn't name me doctor. So I called him Ken.
Mm.
And I said, well, work with him.
Mm.
It's even up until now, most doctors who I come across, I call them by their first name.
Mm.
I break that barrier, because why doctors are the only ones who don't have first names is still a mystery to me. Because some of the people we call doctor in England anyway, I don't know if it's in Australia, are called Mister. But anyway, so I was working at Kings County, and the only there's nothing much exciting working in medical records. However, I did have a brush with history, because, and this is actually an Australian related story. The riots in Crown Heights began. Well, first there was the 2 Haitian kids, or whatever, who were killed when a car ran them over. But then there was what it's always called in the newspapers, a Talmudic scholar, Yankel Rosenbaum, who was Australian, was killed on the streets right near Kings County Hospital, which is just near the Hasidic.
Yeah, I remember the story. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was killed. He died because the residents missed stab wounds in the back. They never turned them over. So when the State Department of Health came for his chart, I was the one who had it. It was passing through my hands to make sure that everything was signed on it. And the chart itself was covered in blood, because obviously they laid on the stretcher when he was bleeding out. That's it. That was like the excitement of working in medical records. I handled Yankel Rosenbaum's chart. It's a story that I'm telling. But I was really good at this job again, and making shit money. But I loved my bosses. And Pascal, I was a single father. When Pascal was 3, his mother and I split up. And it's a rather crass way of putting it, but Catherine got the furniture and I got Pascal. And that really was what happened. She had all the furniture. Pascal and I, we were a couple of guys. He's 3 years old. I was 35, whatever. And we're just sitting on the floor because, I can't be bothered getting a couch until my brother gave me one of his. So what really mattered to me was getting out of work on time. Because he was, at the time, he was 3 years old, 4 years old. He wasn't, he was just going to a sitter. I had to be home. So my bosses allowed me to do all this. Didn't matter what was going on. I could leave, right on the dot at 5 o'clock so I could be home to get Pascal. So it worked for me. Like I said, the pay was terrible, but it was enough for our needs. And because what really mattered now above everything was being around for Pascal.
Mm.
When then I was offered a job at a hospital all the way, a very prestigious hospital in medical records. Again, somebody who I used to help out and warn, don't go near the boss.
Mm.
So she offered me a job, and she offered me a lot of money. And I said, I can't turn it down. It was doubling my salary.
Mm.
And it was really far away. I was going to have to move, but double my salary. So 100% raise is not something you're going to see often. Anybody's ever going to see. Yeah. So when and then she forgot. A couple of days later, she called me up. She said, by the way, how much money did I offer you, Mitch? So I added another 10 grand. And she said, okay. So there it is. All of a sudden, I'm going to go from whatever it was, $45,000 to like $90,000, even more. But I really didn't want to go. I really didn't want to go because this would have been a job that required a far, it would have been an hour and a half, 2 hours on the subway every day. And I was bicycling to work. I lived 3 miles away from the hospital. So I could leave my house, walk Pascal to school once he started school when he was 4 at 8 o'clock and be at my desk at 8:15. You really can't beat that. Anyway, so what they do at the hospital is they had the admitting department, obviously has a director, even hospitals in Australia, wherever have them. And we had an especially terrible one. And they wanted to keep me at Kings County, but they couldn't match the money. So what they did was they said, how about we'll fire the admitting director and we'll give you the job.
Wow.
And I said, works for me. And they said, we can't give you the salary. We can't double your salary, but we'll get you say 20% more. I said, okay, get me the 20% more. That'll be fine. And that was just what happened. At like minutes before I was going to leave, they gave me the job. Now, of course, this other woman who's offered me this absolutely astronomical sums, she's expecting me to show up for work on Monday. And I gotta be a grown-up about this. So I gotta call her up, or I should call her up. So of course I send her a fax and tell her, sorry, I'm not coming. She never forgave me. She died of cancer a few years later. And people told me that to the day she died, she hated my guts.
Right.
What can you do? She's dead. It doesn't do me any good. I feel bad, but not that bad. So anyway, so now I'm the admitting director. And at one point early in my career, I had worked in the admitting department. So now I'm the boss where I once worked in a lower level. And it was here that, I really, hit my stride, because it was a job where finally I could actually help work with people, because people come to a hospital and often there's no bed for them. And often they have to wait and they're unhappy with waiting, or they're in the emergency room, or they're waiting in our office. And I always tried to do whatever I could to get people, beds as quickly as I could. And when they couldn't, I was very apologetic about it. And they would see me and, the patients would see me running around trying to help them out.
Yeah.
And I really loved that part of the job. And the patients loved it too, because, I can't imagine it only happens in New York. One of the things, that nurses are notorious for doing is hiding empty beds, because, nobody wants more work, frankly. And so, I can't fault them on one level, but on the other hand, there's people suffering. So they would not report discharges or whatever. And so I remember there was one patient who I really worked hard to get her a bed. Really, really, really worked hard. And so what happened was, when she finally got one, she became my spy. And I used to try and do this. So I would talk to patients and say, okay, who's leaving? Who's in that bed? And I was able to, to speed up the process. But it was, the admitting director job was absolutely fabulous. And I was good at it, and I had fun, and people liked me, and I got to know, deal with people from all over the hospital. And it was when I was admitting director that it was the year why all this Y2K foolishness.
Right. Yeah.
Y2K foolishness. And at that time, we had an executive director who I absolutely hated and who hated me. And she said that every single manager would have to be there as we crossed over to midnight to make sure, the world doesn't, the systems don't collapse. And so we all had to be there. So of course I played the Pascal card. I can come in, but I can't come in early, my son, and I can't stay too long. He was 16 at that point. The hell, he wasn't going to be hanging out with me anyway. But you have a kid.
Party.
You have a kid, you could just use that for anything, anything. I mean, if I was pushing him into, if he was like a senior citizen in a wheelchair, I still was like, I got to take care of my son. But it was, so we knew it was going to be awful. And I don't remember if it was me or one of my staff brought in an accordion.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was taking accordion lessons, believe it or not. Yeah, so during the night, there was going to be a meal for all of us while we were waiting for everything to go bed. And of course it didn't. But anyway, so we're sitting there and I brought up the accordion. And the mood was really, really ugly because it's New Year's Eve. So, people want to be with their loved ones. And there we all are sitting, doing nothing because there's nothing to be done. And I didn't bring it up with me. I had the accordion in my office, and somehow the executive director heard that I'd come to work with that I had an accordion in my office. She said, "Quick, Mitch, go downstairs, get the accordion." And so, one of the high points of my work life, I sat there as midnight approached at Kings County Hospital, playing accordion for all the assembled managers, just to calm them down so they wouldn't kill somebody, while this was all going on. So then a couple of years later, maybe a year later, I was given another promotion. And this led to my final workplace where I was admitting director. I ran the emergency room. So this was going to be the height. This is as high as I got up in the middle. I ran admitting and the emergency room. Emergency room is a pretty big, important department. So this was going to be as high as I got. But this hospital, I worked in Queens Hospital, much smaller hospital than the ones I'd worked in before. And I loved it. It was the first time that I was just I just loved where I worked. I loved the people where I worked. They loved me. And it was like I was the mayor of the hospital.
Yeah.
What I did was after I've been there a few years, I started paying attention. I couldn't walk down the halls. And if I would see 4 people in a row, I knew at least one of them in the hospital. It was just, I absolutely loved it. It was great. And in fact, the New York City Health and Hospital System, they issue an annual report. And one year they had an article about me as like one of the star employees in this, massive system with, I think, 30,000 employees. So what it all was that I was handed this lemon of working in hospitals. And I just decided, it worked. I was going to make lemonade out of this job that I really did not really want to be doing. But like I said, never got beyond the middle. And I once had a consultant. It was my final job. We were doing applying the Toyota system, lean, to hospitals. So I was running it. I was one of the people running it. And so we had this outside consultant who came in, and we didn't like each other at all. He was this redneck from Kentucky. He was racist. He was just an awful human being. But one day he was sitting in my office and he said, Mitch, I want to tell you something. You could have run any department in this hospital. Hell, man, you could have run a hospital. But you know what? You could never keep your mouth shut. And he had it exactly right, that I remained one of the things I tried to do and I succeeded to do was
Mm.
always remaining myself.
Yeah.
You know, I always spoke like myself. I encouraged staff to call me Mitch, not Mr. Abidor.
Mm.
In fact, when I was running the admitting department, my uncle, Jack Abidor, had once worked in the department.
Yeah.
And the staff all loved him. They remembered him, you know, he moved on. Actually, no, he died. The staff referred to my uncle, who was a clerk, as Mr. Abidor, and I
Really?
ran the department, and I was Mitch.
Yeah.
Now, but now to get to you and stuff, that one of that it was when I was working at Queens, and I was running the emergency room, I think at the time, or just and I just needed something else. I was still reading, I was doing all kinds of stuff. And it was then that I got involved with the Marxist Internet Archive.
Mm.
And, you know, because I just, you know, I needed to do something else. You know, I knew French I started speaking French in 1979. I read in French and everything. And I just wanted to apply it to something.
Mm.
And I had gone on one weekend, it was a Saturday night, I remember. And I looked up stuff about Luis Emilio Recabarren, one of the founders of the Chilean Communist Party.
Mm.
And I saw that on the site, it had something about if you want to volunteer.
Mm.
So I wrote and said, you know, I'd like to translate from French. And you were the one who responded.
Mm.
And you were the one who suggested that I translate Blanqui, who had never been translated into English.
Mm.
You know, the great revolutionary 19th century
Except
French.
for the thing about the stars, which you actually like. And it was the last book I wanted to translate. I was interested in getting his manual for a revolution translated.
Well, no, you know, because the Eternity Through the Stars, it's got most of it is unreadable, you know, gibberish. But there's parts of it that I love. But what I did was, when I got, you know, once I started translating, I was just loving it. I was absolutely loving it. I was loving seeing my name on the internet. You know, I remember like once writing to you complaining that my name had been misspelled on the What's New or something, because everything, you know, he was finally, you know, I was doing something, and what I did was it didn't matter what position I was in. I was never one of those. Not only was I not somebody who worked late, I was also somebody, I took lunch every day. It didn't matter what job I had. And I was open and unabashed about it. I'm taking lunch and I'm taking a nap.
Yeah.
So don't bother me.
Your years in France must have helped you there.
It wasn't even that long, but a man needs his rest is what it is. I mean, in fact, I remember one time, when I was a doctor was coming to see me when I was an admitting director, and it was around 12:30, and everybody knew 12:30 to 1:30, that's my nap time, my lunch / reading / nap time. And so somebody said, "Is Mitch in his office?" One of the chief doctors, and my clerk said, "Yeah, but it's his nap time. Don't do it." And they said, "No, I have to go. I got to talk to him. There's an issue, and I got to go talk to him." And my staff said, "Please don't do it." They told me this afterwards, because he's going to be cranky and we're the ones who are going to pay for it. But anyway, so once I started translating, you know, that hour when I closed the door, I gave up some of my nap time to translate. And also I would cheat at quiet moments, you know, even during the workday. If there was something I was working on that was interesting as a translation, I would do it. And but also, you know, the advantage of a job that even though, however high placed it was, I still managed for the most part to blot out what I did for a living, even when I ran 24-hour departments, like admitting in the emergency room. And I would come home, and it was something that Charles Lamb, the great English essayist, said, who worked at the East India Company, that, you know, working, if you have a job from 9 to 5, you still have plenty of time to get other things done. If you want to write, there's still from 5 o'clock till you go to sleep. And so that was what I did. So, you know, translating was finally putting all of my knowledge and my interests and stuff to work, while not having the pressure of having to earn a living from it. I mean, I know people who make a living from translating,
Mm.
and life is just hell for them, or
Yeah.
writers.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have a job coming, or if they're paying you little or whatever, the going rate for a translator is like 20, 25 cents a word.
Mm.
So you have to have something going on constantly. I didn't. I could just do whatever I want for free.
I'd like to talk to you about your career after work later, but let's wind up at this, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
And let's talk next time about your love life. Yeah.
But you know what? I just realized I left out, a story that I love to tell. And I was so good by the, I was so highly regarded by the time it all ended, that I was working on this project that got me, I was interviewed on TV, they wrote about me in the newspapers. It was like really a big deal. And so the person who was in charge of like all the hospitals in our region wanted to come see me.
Mm.
To just to congratulate me and talk to me, get my my insights on stuff. Now, my office, I had a huge flag of Rifondazione Comunista hanging on the wall.
Right.
So big red flag with the hammer and sickle.
Mm.
And so this big shot, this really, really big shot, who within a couple months was going to be president of the whole hospital system, is coming to my office. What do I do with that flag? And I said, you know what? It's me.